Hello, everyone. Back to our interview series. The US had long avoided formally recognizing the 1915 mass killings of Armenians as a genocide. But now, President Joe Biden has become the first American leader to do just that. The move has caused anger in Turkey, while many Armenians and rights groups have welcomed the decision. The main question is, where does this leave relations between two of NATO's biggest allies? We'll bring in our guests in just a moment. First, this report from CNN senior international correspondent Arwa Damon in Turkey.
President Joe Biden has decided which side of history the U.S. will be standing on Saturday in a written statement calling the mass killings of Armenians under the Ottoman Empire a genocide. This is something that previous U.S. presidents had shied away from, not wanting to risk the relationship with NATO ally Turkey. Turkey has consistently maintained that the killings that took place do not fall under the definition of a genocide, and has said that alongside the Armenians that were killed, there were also hundreds of thousands of other individuals who were killed as well. Turkey coming out very quickly with a response of its own. The foreign minister tweeting, "We are not going to take lessons about our history from anyone," calling this statement by President Biden political opportunism and a vulgar distortion of history. Now, Turkey's President Erdogan had a statement of its own on this day, one that was made before we heard from President Biden, and one that echoes statements that he has been making for years right now, acknowledging that killings took place, expressing condolences, but also saying the politicization of debates, which historians ought to engage in by third parties and their use as a tool of meddling, has not served anyone's interest. He also went on to state that Turks and Armenians must finally demonstrate that we have reached the kind of maturity to overcome all obstacles together. Many analysts looking at this have said that this does potentially risk even further fracturing the relationship between the United States and Turkey, one that is already at this stage incredibly tenuous. The relationship between Presidents Biden and Erdogan is not exactly on solid ground at this stage, and it is going to be very interesting to see how both of these countries move forward, given where all of their interests do align, especially when it comes to the arena of security. But once again, we have a situation where the plight and pain of a population has been significantly politicized and polarized.
Okay, so let's bring in our guest. Joining us from Monterey, California, we have Ryan Gingeras, professor at Naval Postgraduate School and historian of the late Ottoman Empire, an expert on Turkey and Balkan and Middle East history. Ryan, a warm welcome to our stream.
Thank you very much for having me.
We've had such a careful use of language for so many years. Why the change, and why historians are more inclined to see it as a genocide?
I think it's really for two separate issues, for two separate reasons. I think the decision to recognize the genocide now under President Joe Biden, I think at the very least is recognition that the relationship between the United States and Turkey really probably couldn't be worse. And that at this point, I think that there's not really a reason to believe that Ankara would probably continue to act in the way that it is, acted, for example, in the Eastern Mediterranean or in Syria or in the Caucasus, that putting off the genocide recognition would somehow help alleviate or help improve American-Turkish relations. And I think, at the same time, in the United States at least, we've had this conversation every year, come pretty close to recognizing it, and for one reason or another, backed off of it, usually thinking that, well, this is only going to make matters worse. And I think the recognition is now that it probably can't get much worse than it is already. As far as historians go, I would say that, in the last 20 years, there's been something of a real renaissance within the study of Turkey. And I think historians now can say really confidently that there was a clear, organized, coordinated campaign to destroy the Ottoman Armenian population during the First World War, and that's based on records of the Ottoman Empire itself. So I think, if you want to marry the two, I think now policymakers themselves are more conscious of the fact that historians are more confident in this judgment. And so, at least from the side of history, they know that they're in good standing.
In terms of the U.S. and Turkey relation, are we safe to assume that, do you think it's currently at risk of falling apart? And what would that mean for the global balance of power?
I am skeptical that even under the current circumstances, you're going to get an absolute rupture in U.S.-Turkish relations. And I would say that for a few reasons. I think the primary one is that Turkey is a member of NATO. There is no mechanism by which Turkey can be removed or evicted from NATO. Turkey has made it very clear that it values its presence in NATO, which is an issue separate altogether. It's very clear that the United States and Turkey are intertwined in lots of ways, in terms of security, in terms of engagement, for example, in maritime issues. I think that the idea of an absolute rupture would arguably hurt Turkey more than it would hurt the United States. Yeah. And so I think, this is, a short list. One could go on a little bit longer. So I don't necessarily see this as, a potential breaking point. I think this is more representative or more of a symptom of what is, generally speaking, a strained relationship, not necessarily a very functional relationship, but not one that necessarily is going to completely fall apart.
Now, as far as Greece is concerned, what do you think it means for for Greek people and for the contemporary Greece-Turkey relations? We saw just recently Turkish foreign minister and his Greek counterpart clashing at a joint news conference in Ankara.
Right. I mean, I think one thing that has very much changed, at least in the way I followed it, in the last 5 to 10 years, is how much Turkish politics, and more importantly, Turkish nationalist politics, have become animated around the issue of Greece, and that this is not simply a contemporary issue. This is also one that is based in history. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is that there is a real issue around the fact that it is the 100th anniversary of the founding of Turkey, and that this anniversary features Greece in a really important role, that of Turkey's antagonist. And so I think this is, a part of the overall universe of how Turkey and Greece is going to probably interact over the next several months, perhaps several years, in which large numbers of people have come to see Greece not simply in a negative light, but also as an existential threat. And I think the fact that now, at this very moment, people are reminded that Greece is Turkey's foil. It's seen as its historical antagonist, and the state that will define its current emergence or current story within contemporary global politics.
I listened to a podcast in which you were hosted, and you said Turkey knows it can be aggressive with Greece without any cost. That was back in July. Do you think this is still the case? I mean, in view of the latest political developments in Brussels and the US, as well as the internal economic struggles in Turkey?
I think it will depend on the circumstances. I think that last summer, when Turkey ratcheted up pressure in the Eastern Mediterranean, especially in terms of deploying ships and raising the level of the rhetoric, this was seen, perhaps in hindsight, as a test of the current will of the EU, perhaps the United States, in pushing back against Turkey's interests in the Eastern Mediterranean. And conceivably, Turkey received verbal warning, but it wasn't necessarily, it was something, these were moves that were countered in any kind of, forceful way. And I think events since then have shown that the EU is rather keen to simply keep a lid on this issue, not necessarily address it very directly, and doesn't seem to possess the political will to get out ahead of this issue and deal with Turkey in a more forceful way. And I would say that from the inside looking out, from the perspective of Ankara, the current situation would suggest that Ankara can still act within a fairly wide envelope and not have to deal with any direct political costs. It's not going to be, it's the accession process, for example, within the EU doesn't seem in danger at present. The risk of sanctions are certainly there, but there's not necessarily unanimity among EU members on this issue. The United States is a country that is distracted by lots of different issues at the same time. So Ankara may look at this moment and say, well, the odds are still very much in our favor. The wind is still very much at our back. Perhaps, maybe not now, but in the future, this is still something that they could press that much further.
Absolutely. Ryan, Gingeras, thank you very much for joining us on CNN.
Thank you very much for having me.